They found an old book in the dump. What happened next will leave you speechless. It was just another cold, endless night of survival until they found it. Buried beneath the city's discarded waste, an old leather-bound book lay untouched, as if waiting for someone to discover it. Two young girls, Emma and Lily, picked it up, not knowing that this single moment would change their lives forever. What was hidden inside? And how did this forgotten book lead them somewhere they never imagined? Dear family, which country are you watching from? Leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe to support us. Now let's get started. The air was sharp with cold, thick with the scent of damp pavement and something else. Something forgotten, something discarded. The city, in these hours before dawn, belonged to the unseen. It belonged to those who moved in silence, to those who searched for remnants of a life they were never meant to have. Emma pulled her coat tighter around her, though it did little to keep the cold from creeping into her bones. The coat had once belonged to her mother, but time had stripped it of warmth, leaving behind only the faintest trace of lavender soap. She exhaled, watching her breath curl in the frigid air, and stepped onto the cracked sidewalk. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed before fading into the vast, empty streets. The streetlights above her flickered, casting long, distorted shadows against graffiti-stained walls. Behind her, in the dimly lit shack they called home, her parents were preparing for another night of scavenging. "Let's move before the trucks come," her father Jack muttered, adjusting the straps of his worn sack. Her mother Maria pulled a tattered scarf over her head, her fingers stiff from the cold. She glanced at Emma, her lips parting slightly as if she wanted to say something. But instead, she simply nodded. There was no need for words. They had all learned their roles long ago. Jack would head toward the old market district, where shopkeepers sometimes tossed out bruised fruit or broken goods. Maria would take the alleys behind the restaurants, hoping for day-old bread or leftovers. And Emma, she had her own route. She turned down a narrow alley where the pavement was slick with last night's rain, and the shadows stretched wide, swallowing the light. She had walked this path 100 times, yet every night it felt different. The city, even at rest, had a pulse, a quiet, restless hum beneath the silence. A memory surfaced, unbidden. "When the world sleeps," her father had once told her, back when his voice was lighter, before the weight of years had settled into his shoulders. "That's when you listen. That's when you find the things no one else sees." Emma hadn't understood then, but now as she moved through the sleeping city, she did. The wind picked up, sending scraps of paper skittering across the pavement. A loose shutter rattled in the distance. She kept walking, her sneakers worn thin against the unforgiving concrete. There was no time to think about the cold, or the ache in her stomach, or the way her fingers burned from the wind. She had work to do. She knew the best places to look, the alleys behind the towering buildings where the wealthy discarded their old furniture, their forgotten toys, their unread books. Sometimes she found things worth keeping, a coat with only a few holes, a watch that almost worked, a pair of shoes too big but still sturdy. Mostly, though, she found reminders of lives she would never live. Tonight she prayed for luck. She reached the mouth of another alley, its darkness stretching out before her like an open wound. She took a deep breath, adjusted the too long sleeves of her coat, and stepped inside. As she navigated between two rusted dumpsters, her eyes caught a glimpse of something out of place among the crumpled newspapers and torn cardboard boxes. A deep red, almost maroon, peeking through the filth. It was small, half buried beneath a tangle of plastic bags. She crouched down, carefully pushing aside the debris until her fingers brushed against the worn surface. A book. Emma hesitated. It wasn't often that she found books in good enough condition to bother picking up. Most were damp, their pages fused together, their covers ripped beyond recognition. But this one, though the edges were frayed and the spine was cracked, was still whole. She lifted it gently, shaking off the dust and grime. The cover was torn, the title barely legible, but when she opened it, the pages inside were untouched, their words still crisp beneath the dim alley light. A shiver ran down her spine, though it wasn't from the cold. Books weren't valuable in the way food or clothes were, but to Emma they meant something else entirely. They were doors to places she would never go, glimpses into lives far removed from her own. She ran her fingers over the fragile pages, tracing the lines of text, imagining the hands that once held it, the stories it had carried before ending up here, discarded among the city's refuse. She didn't hear the footsteps at first, too absorbed in the feel of the book in her hands. But then, a voice. "That won't fill your stomach, you know." Emma spun around, her grip tightening on the book. A girl stood just a few feet away, half hidden in the shadows. Her clothes were just as worn as Emma's, her hair tangled, her arms crossed over her chest. But there was something sharp in her eyes. Not hostility, but curiosity, a quiet assessment. Emma swallowed, instinctively pulling the book closer to her chest, as if it were something precious, something worth protecting. The girl took a step closer, tilting her head. "What is it?" Emma hesitated before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. "A book." The girl gave a small, almost amused snort. "Books don't put food on the table." Emma knew that her parents wouldn't care about it, that it had no real use in the life she lived. But as she stood there, the weight of the book pressing into her palms, she also knew one other thing. Some things, some treasures, weren't meant to be sold. Emma's grip on the book tightened as she studied the girl standing before her. The dim light of the alley barely illuminated her face, but Emma could see the sharp angles of her features, the way her thin arms wrapped around herself as if bracing against a cold much deeper than the night's chill. Her clothes were as worn as Emma's, maybe worse, her jeans ripped at the knees, her oversized sweatshirt hanging off her shoulders like a hand-me-down that had passed through too many hands before reaching her. The girl took another step closer, her bare feet silent against the concrete. Emma caught a flicker of movement, her eyes darting toward a discarded fast food bag near one of the dumpsters, then back to Emma's hands, to the book she held, as if it were something worth more than food, more than warmth. "What's it about?" the girl asked, nodding toward the book. Emma hesitated. She glanced down at the cover, its title faded and peeling. She hadn't even had time to see what kind of book it was, but that didn't matter. It was a book, and that alone was enough. "I don't know yet," she admitted. The girl smirked, a lopsided, almost amused expression. "Then why are you holding it like that?" Emma glanced at the book in her hands, realizing how tightly she had been pressing it against her chest, as if someone might try to rip it away. Slowly, she loosened her grip but didn't let go. "It's not like it's worth anything," the girl continued. "You can't trade it for food." Emma knew that. She knew it the way she knew hunger, the way she knew the sharp ache of cold settling into her bones. But there was something about holding a book, about the weight of it in her hands, that felt different. The girl must have seen something in her face because she let out a small sigh, running a hand through her tangled hair. "You're weird," she muttered. Then after a pause, she added, "I'm Lily." Emma blinked, startled by the sudden offer of a name. She hadn't expected that. People like them didn't always exchange names. Names meant familiarity, and familiarity was dangerous when survival meant drifting from one forgotten corner of the city to the next. Still, something about Lily's presence, about the way she stood there, unafraid, curious, made Emma respond before she could stop herself. "Emma." Lily nodded, as if tucking the name away somewhere in her mind. Then she turned slightly, scanning the alley with a practiced eye. "Not much here tonight," she murmured, mostly to herself. Emma could tell what she was doing, scoping out anything that might be worth taking. She wasn't looking for books. She was looking for food, for bottles she could trade, for scraps of anything that could be turned into something useful. Emma had done the same thing for years, had memorized the places where the best leftovers could sometimes be found, had learned to move quickly before the early morning workers came out and swept the streets clean. They weren't the same, but they weren't so different either. Lily turned back to her. "You gonna keep that?" she asked, nodding toward the book. Emma hesitated again. Then before she could second-guess herself, she shifted the book in her hands and held it out. "You can read it too," she said, surprising even herself. Lily looked at her, truly looked at her, as if trying to figure out if this was some kind of trick. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than before, lacking its earlier edge. "I don't have time for that." Emma didn't argue. She just shrugged, tucking the book under her arm. Maybe someday. Lily didn't respond right away. Then she gave another one of those lopsided smirks. Maybe. She turned to leave, melting back into the shadows of the alley. Emma watched her go, the weight of the book still solid in her hands, feeling just for a moment that maybe, just maybe, she had found something tonight that was worth more than what could be sold. The night air clung to Emma's skin as she slipped quietly into the doorway of her home. The small makeshift shack was dark, the only sound inside the slow, steady breathing of her parents, exhausted from another long night of scavenging. She hesitated just inside, listening, waiting to make sure they were truly asleep. Carefully, she slid the book from under her coat, its weight solid and familiar in her hands. She could already imagine what her parents would say if they saw it. What good is a book when your stomach is empty? She didn't blame them for thinking that way. Survival didn't leave room for stories. Emma moved soundlessly across the room, tucking the book beneath the thin mattress she slept on. The fabric was rough beneath her fingers, patched so many times it barely resembled a real blanket anymore. The cold had settled into the floorboards, seeping through her clothes, but she barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere. She waited. Minutes stretched long and slow in the darkness. When she was sure her parents wouldn't stir, she reached beneath the mattress, her fingers curling around the book's worn edges. She lit the kerosene lamp with practiced ease, its soft glow flickering across the walls. The flame wavered, casting long shadows, but it was enough. Carefully, she opened the book. The pages, though slightly yellowed, were intact. The words printed in crisp, small letters. Her fingers traced the first sentence, a quiet thrill running through her. She had always loved the way books could transport her somewhere else, somewhere far from the damp streets, the cold nights, the gnawing hunger that never really left. The night stretched on, the city outside humming with distant sounds, cars rolling down empty streets, the occasional bark of a stray dog. Emma barely noticed. She was lost in the pages, in a world that didn't demand anything from her, a world where she didn't have to keep moving just to survive. By the time she closed the book, the flame of the lamp had burned low. She exhaled, pressing the book to her chest before slipping it back under her mattress. Sleep found her quickly, and for the first time in a long while, her dreams were filled with something other than hunger. The next evening, as the city dipped once more into darkness, Emma found herself walking the same path back to the alley. She told herself it was just habit, just another night like any other. But deep down, she knew the truth. She wanted to see Lily again. The alley was just as she had left it, silent, forgotten, tucked away from the world. She stood there for a moment, the book she had brought pressed against her ribs. Doubt crept in. Maybe Lily wouldn't come back. Maybe she had already moved on, the way people like them always did. Then, movement in the shadows. Lily stepped into the dim glow of a distant streetlight, her expression unreadable. She was thinner than Emma had realized the night before, her sweatshirt hanging off her like it barely belonged to her. But her eyes were sharp, watching Emma carefully. "You again," Lily said, her tone somewhere between curiosity and amusement. Emma swallowed the unexpected relief that washed over her. "Yeah." Lily's gaze flicked to the book in Emma's hands. "Found another one?" Emma hesitated, then took a step forward, holding it out. "I thought you might want to read it with me." Lily stared at the book as if it were something foreign, something she didn't quite know what to do with. "I already told you, I don't have time for that." Emma shrugged, not letting the rejection settle. "It doesn't have to be long, just a little before we go looking for stuff." Lily didn't move at first. Then after a moment she sighed, stuffing her hands into the pockets of her sweatshirt. "Fine, but just for a little while." Emma smiled, sinking down onto the cold pavement. She opened the book, letting the words spill out into the quiet night. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't reading alone. The nights became their refuge, a quiet rhythm woven into the fabric of the city's forgotten corners. In a world that had never given them much, these stolen moments beneath the flickering streetlights felt like something entirely their own. Untouched, safe, almost sacred. Emma and Lily sat shoulder to shoulder on the cracked pavement, their backs pressed against the cold brick of an abandoned building. The night stretched around them, vast and silent, as if the world had briefly stopped to give them space to breathe. Between them, a book lay open, its worn pages catching the dim, amber glow of the street lamp overhead. Emma traced her finger beneath the words, the tips of her fingers rough from too many winters spent without gloves. "Sound it out," she said softly, her voice barely more than a whisper in the cold air. Lily hesitated, her brows knitting together in concentration. Her lips moved in silence before she finally spoke, her voice slow and uncertain. Adventure, Emma smiled. "Yeah, adventure." Lily let out a breath, something between a sigh and a laugh, shaking her head. "That's what this is, huh?" she said, nodding toward the book. "People running around, chasing treasure, fighting villains." Emma tilted her head, considering. "Pretty much." Lily smirked, though there was something softer beneath it, something thoughtful. "I don't see how it's useful." Emma ran her fingers over the smooth paper, feeling the slight give of the pages beneath her touch. "It's not about being useful," she said after a moment. "It's about leaving, even if it's just for a little while." And they did leave. Night after night, as they traced the words on the worn pages, the alley around them faded, the cold forgotten, the hunger pushed aside. They were no longer two girls huddled beneath a street lamp, but travelers, explorers, heroes in their own stories. They sailed across stormy seas, uncovered lost cities, outwitted villains. They became characters in tales that had nothing to do with surviving and everything to do with living. But reality was never far. No matter how long they lingered in the pages, the world always pulled them back. The city did not wait for them. It did not slow down. When the first hints of dawn touched the sky, the spell would break. Emma and Lily would close the book, their fingers lingering for just a second longer on the pages, as if trying to hold on to the world inside. Then with silent nods, they would rise to their feet, brushing the dust from their clothes. Without a word, they would slip away, Lily vanishing into the shadows toward home, Emma walking back through the empty streets, the weight of reality settling on her shoulders once more. And so it went. The nights passed like this, their hidden world tucked away beneath streetlights and shadows. The city moved on without them, unaware of the two girls who sat together, learning, dreaming, escaping. Lily got better. She still stumbled, still tripped over words that twisted under her tongue, but she kept trying, and Emma kept showing up, always waiting, always ready to guide her back into the stories. The night stretched long and empty as Emma sat beneath the street lamp, her fingers curled tightly around the spine of a new book she had found. The cold pressed into her, but she barely felt it. Her eyes flicked between the alley entrance and the pages in her hands, scanning the words without really seeing them. She kept waiting for the sound of footsteps, for the familiar shuffle of Lily slipping out of the shadows. But Lily never came. Emma's stomach twisted with something heavier than hunger. She tried to reason with herself. Maybe Lily had just been caught up searching for food, or maybe she had found something worth selling and lost track of time. Maybe. Still, the unease sat in her chest, unmoving. The next night she went back, and the next. Each time she waited. Each time the alley remained silent. On the fourth night, Emma couldn't sit still any longer. She shoved the book into her coat and set off into the dark streets, moving quickly, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. She retraced the paths she knew, the places Lily had mentioned in passing, the backlots of convenience stores, the loading docks behind the supermarket, the long stretch of chain-link fences near the recycling plant where people sometimes tossed out bottles and cans. Nothing. Emma's pulse pounded against her ribs. A small, sharp voice in her head whispered the kind of thoughts she didn't want to name. Had something happened? Had Lily left? Then, just as she was about to turn back, she spotted movement near a crumbling brick wall at the far end of the alley. A small figure, hunched over, shoulders drawn tight against the cold. Emma exhaled in relief before she even realized she had been holding her breath. "Lily!" she called, stepping forward. Lily jerked at the sound of her name, her head snapping up. For a brief moment, her face was unreadable. Then her expression hardened. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was sharp, not like before. Emma hesitated. She had expected relief, maybe even annoyance, but not this. "I was looking for you," she said cautiously. "You didn't come back." Lily turned her head, staring at the cracked pavement. She looked different, tense like a wire pulled too tight. The usual sharpness in her eyes was dulled, replaced by something heavier. "My parents found out," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "They don't want me wasting time on books. Said I need to focus on finding real things. Things we can sell." Emma felt a pang in her chest. She knew what Lily meant, knew what it was like to have survival weigh down on you until everything else felt foolish, unnecessary. Lily let out a hollow laugh. "Told you, didn't I? Books don't put food on the table." Emma didn't answer right away. She just looked at Lily, at the exhaustion lining her face, at the way her fingers curled tightly into the sleeves of her sweatshirt like she was trying to disappear inside it. "Then we'll find more," Emma said suddenly. Lily frowned. "What?" Emma took a step closer. "If we work together, we can find more stuff, more food, more things to trade. That way they won't notice when you're gone for a little while." Lily didn't respond right away. Emma could see the battle happening inside her, the part of her that wanted to survive, and the part of her that had started to crave something more than just survival. Finally, she let out a slow breath. "You really think we can pull that off?" Emma nodded. "Yeah, I do." Lily studied her for a long moment, then finally a small smirk pulled at the corner of her lips. "You really don't give up, do you?" Emma shook her head. "Not on this." Lily sighed, running a hand through her tangled hair. Then with a quiet nod, she said, "Okay." And just like that, they had a plan. The night air carried the scent of damp pavement and rusting metal as Emma and Lily moved through the alleys, their eyes scanning the ground with the practiced precision of those who had learned to see value in what the rest of the world discarded. Their plan had worked so far. By working together, they found more, collected more, and Lily's absences at home had gone unnoticed. But survival was still a thin thread, always threatening to snap beneath them. Emma crouched near a pile of broken furniture, her fingers brushing against the splintered wood of an old chair. Nothing useful. She sighed, pushing herself up, when something caught her eye. A flash of deep brown, half-hidden, beneath a heap of torn fabric. She moved toward it, nudging aside the fabric with careful hands. What she found made her breath hitch. It was a book, but not like the others. The cover was dark brown leather, smooth beneath her fingertips despite the dust clinging to it. Gold embossing traced the edges in intricate designs, curling like vines. It felt heavy, more substantial than the flimsy paperbacks she usually found. There were no tears, no water damage, no missing pages. It was pristine. Lily stepped closer, frowning. "Another book?" Emma didn't answer. She slowly opened it, her fingers pressing into the stiff spine. The pages inside were thick, yellowed with age, but instead of printed words, they were filled with delicate, curling script, writing that didn't look entirely familiar. Scattered between the text were sketches, old maps, symbols drawn with precise ink strokes, illustrations of places that neither of them recognized. Lily crouched beside her, tilting her head. "That doesn't look like any book I've ever seen." Emma ran a hand over the pages, something inside her stirring, something she couldn't name. It didn't just feel old. It felt important. "Maybe it's some kind of history book," she murmured. Lily scoffed. "Then why would someone throw it away?" Emma had no answer. They spent the next few minutes flipping through the pages, trying to decipher the words, but the letters blurred together in a script neither of them could read. There was a strange weight to the book, as if it carried something beyond its paper and ink. That night, when they returned to their usual spot beneath a street lamp, the book lay between them, open to a page where a map stretched across the parchment, dotted with symbols that meant nothing to them. The streets around them were quiet, the city humming its usual song of distant sirens and flickering neon lights. Lily was the first to break the silence. "We should sell it." Emma stiffened. "No." Lily raised an eyebrow. "Emma, we don't even know what it is." Emma shook her head. "It's different." Lily sighed, but she didn't argue. Instead, she leaned back against the cold brick wall and pulled her knees to her chest. The night stretched on, and after a while they fell into silence. their breath visible in the cold air. It wasn't until later when they were parting ways that they heard the news. A radio played faintly from a shop window, the announcer's voice carrying into the empty streets. The City Museum has confirmed that among the stolen artifacts from last week's break-in is a rare manuscript believed to be over 400 years old. Authorities urge anyone who may have seen or encountered the document to come forward. Emma and Lily froze. Slowly, Emma looked down at the book still clutched in her arms. Their hearts pounded in unison as the truth settled between them. They were holding something priceless. The book sat between them, its dark leather cover catching the dim glow of the street lamp. The weight of it was no longer just physical. It was something heavier, something neither of them had ever held before. Lily's arms were crossed tightly over her chest, her expression guarded. "We should sell it," she said, her voice flat. Emma shook her head immediately. "No." Lily let out a frustrated breath. "Emma, we don't even know what it is. If it's really the book from the museum, we could get something for it. A lot, probably." Emma's fingers curled around the edge of the book protectively. "And who exactly are we going to sell it to? You think some guy on the street is just going to hand us a pile of cash? That's not how this works." Lily scowled but said nothing. Emma softened her voice. "This isn't just any book. It's not like the ones we find in the trash. It belongs somewhere safe." Lily looked away, kicking at a loose piece of gravel. "Yeah, well, it doesn't belong to us either." Emma hesitated. That was true. For all the things she had found in the city's forgotten corners, none had ever made her feel like this. Not just fascinated, but responsible. The book wasn't theirs, but they had it, and now they had to decide what to do with it. Emma's voice was quieter when she spoke again. "If we take it back, they might think we stole it." Lily gave a dry laugh. "Might? Emma, we're two kids who live off the street. What do you think they're going to assume?" Emma swallowed. The thought had been circling in her mind since the moment she heard the radio broadcast. If they walked into the museum or the police station and said, "Hey, we found your priceless book in the trash," would anyone believe them? Or would they assume the worst? Two nameless girls with no one to vouch for them. Lily sighed and ran a hand through her tangled hair. "We should just walk away. Leave it here. Someone else will find it." But Emma knew better. The city swallowed things whole. If they left it, it would disappear again, maybe for good. "No," she said firmer this time. "We're taking it back, but we'll do it our way." Lily frowned. "What does that mean?" Emma exhaled, already forming the plan in her mind. "We can't just hand it to them, but we can make sure it gets where it's supposed to be." Lily arched an eyebrow. "You have a plan?" Emma nodded. "We're taking it to the library." Lily stared at her for a long moment, then laughed under her breath. "You really don't know how to let things go, do you?" Emma smirked. "Nope." The next night, under the cover of darkness, they wrapped the book in a piece of cloth and walked toward the library. The city loomed around them, quiet except for the occasional hum of a passing car. They moved quickly, keeping to the alleys, Emma clutching the book close to her chest as if it might vanish before they got there. The library was an old stone building with high windows and tall doors that always seemed heavier than they should be. Emma had only been inside once, years ago, when a teacher had taken her class there. It had been warm, filled with soft whispers and the smell of old paper. A place where stories were kept safe. They slipped inside just before closing, unnoticed in the shuffle of people leaving for the night. The front desk was empty, the librarian's chair pushed back as if they had stepped away only for a moment. Emma's heart pounded. This was it. Carefully, she placed the wrapped book on the desk, smoothing the fabric as if it might somehow explain everything on its own. Lily stood beside her, shifting uncomfortably, glancing toward the door. Emma looked at her, then back at the book. A final hesitation, a silent goodbye. Then, without a word, they turned and slipped out the door, disappearing into the night before anyone could see them. The library was quiet in the early morning, the kind of stillness that only existed before the city fully woke. Soft light filtered through the high windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floors. The librarian, an older man with silver-threaded hair and wire-rimmed glasses, settled into his chair with a sigh. He reached for the stack of returns left on the front desk the night before. His fingers brushed against something unexpected, a bundle wrapped in cloth, its edges carefully folded as if placed there with great intention. Frowning, he unfolded the fabric, revealing the book beneath. The dark brown leather cover was unlike anything that had passed through his hands before. His fingertips traced the intricate gold embossing, the delicate craftsmanship of another time. He opened it carefully, and as his eyes scanned the first few pages, his breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary book. A weight settled in his chest as he reached for the phone. Within minutes, the call was made. The museum staff arrived swiftly, their footsteps hurried with the kind of urgency reserved for something truly priceless. They examined the book under careful hands, murmuring in hushed tones, turning pages as if handling something sacred. One of them, a man in a tailored coat with an air of authority, straightened and spoke with quiet certainty. "It's real." A ripple of relief passed through the group. The stolen manuscript, lost, feared to be gone forever, had been returned. But by whom? The authorities pressed for answers. The library staff checked records, questioned employees, but no one had seen anything unusual. No one had come forward. The book had simply appeared, left behind like a secret. The city buzzed with the news. The manuscript's recovery made headlines, though the story remained incomplete. Who had returned it? Who had saved a treasure that could have so easily vanished into the shadows? The mystery remained unsolved, at least for a little while. A week later, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city turned gold beneath the streetlights, Emma walked past the library on her usual route. She kept her head down, hands tucked deep into the pockets of her too large coat. She hadn't expected to feel anything when she heard the news about the book's return, but when she read the headlines, something had stirred inside her, something close to pride, though she wouldn't dare name it that. She had done the right thing. That was all that mattered. But as she passed the tall stone steps of the library, a voice called out behind her. "Excuse me." "Wait." Emma froze. Footsteps followed, quick but steady, and when she turned, she saw him, the librarian. He studied her, his gaze kind but curious, as if he were piecing together a puzzle. Then, with quiet certainty, he asked, "Was it you?" Emma stood frozen on the sidewalk, the librarian's question still hanging in the air between them. The city hummed around them, cars rolling by, distant footsteps echoing against pavement. But in that moment, everything else faded. "Was it you?" he asked again, his voice quiet, steady, not accusing, just knowing. Emma's instinct was to run. She had spent her whole life learning how to disappear, how to blend into the background, how to never draw attention to herself. But this was different. She didn't answer. Not with words, but something in the way she held his gaze must have been enough. The librarian gave a small nod, as if confirming something he had already suspected. Then, to her surprise, he smiled. "Come inside," he said. Emma hesitated. "I promise," he added, reading the wariness in her posture. "It's not trouble." Still, she didn't move. But then he said something else, something that made her breath catch. "The museum wants to meet whoever returned the book. They want to say thank you." Emma blinked, her fingers curled inside her coat pockets. Thank you. No one had ever thanked her for anything before. A part of her wanted to turn and leave, to shake her head and let the mystery remain unsolved. But another part, quieter, deeper, wanted to know what it would feel like to be seen. So she nodded. The meeting was arranged, and for the first time in their lives, Emma and Lily found themselves sitting in a place that had never been meant for them. A grand, sunlit office in the heart of the city, surrounded by people who spoke in polite voices and wore press suits. It felt like another world, far removed from the alleys they had always known. Lily shifted in her chair, her fingers drumming against the armrest. "This is weird," she muttered under her breath. Emma swallowed. "Yeah." Then the door opened, and a man entered. He was older, with sharp eyes and a kind face, dressed in a crisp navy suit. He carried himself with the ease of someone who had never had to wonder where his next meal would come from. But when he spoke, his voice was warm. "You must be Emma and Lily." Neither of them answered right away. Lily glanced at Emma, and Emma, heart pounding, gave a small nod. The man smiled. "I'm James Calloway. I work with the museum, and I wanted to personally thank you both for what you did." He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. "Please sit." They sat. He studied them for a moment before speaking again. "The book you returned is invaluable," he said. "It's not just an artifact. It's history. It's something that tells a story from centuries ago. And without you, it might have been lost forever." Lily shifted in her seat. "We just found it," she said, as if that explained everything. Calloway's eyes softened. "And you made the choice to bring it back." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you know how rare that is?" Emma wasn't sure how to answer. She had never thought of it as rare. It had just been the right thing to do. Calloway exhaled, glancing between them. "I don't want this to be the end of your story," he said. "I want to help." Emma tensed. She had learned early on that when people said they wanted to help, there was usually something they wanted in return. But Calloway didn't ask for anything. Instead, he reached into his desk and pulled out a folder, sliding it toward them. "There's a program we work with," he explained. "It helps kids who don't have access to school. If you're willing, we can arrange for you both to start classes. And we can help your families too, so they don't have to worry about losing what you bring in." Emma's hands clenched into fists beneath the table. School. It had never been an option before. She and Lily had spent their lives scraping by, surviving day to day, their futures as uncertain as the next meal. But now someone was offering something different. Lily was the first to speak. "Why?" she asked, suspicion laced in her voice. "Why would you do that for us?" Calloway met her gaze. "Because you deserve a chance," he said simply. Neither of them knew what to say. The decision wasn't entirely theirs, though. Their parents had to agree. At first, the answer was no. Emma's father, Jack, scoffed at the idea. "School doesn't put food on the table." Her mother hesitated, torn between hope and fear. "And what if it's not real?" she whispered to Emma that night. "What if they're just making promises they won't keep?" Lily's parents were the same. Their lives had been built on survival, and survival didn't leave room for dreams. But Calloway didn't give up. He met with them. He explained how the program worked, how their families would receive help, how Emma and Lily wouldn't have to choose between learning and putting food on the table. Slowly, the resistance softened, and then finally came the words Emma hadn't dared to hope for. "All right," Jack said one evening, rubbing a hand over his face, his voice thick with exhaustion. "You can go." Emma barely breathed. Her mother reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's face, her touch both hesitant and tender. "Just don't forget where you come from," she murmured. Emma swallowed hard. "I won't." And just like that, their lives began to change. The first day of school felt like stepping into another world. Emma and Lily stood at the entrance of the building, the sheer size of it overwhelming. The walls stretched high, lined with windows that gleamed under the morning sun. Inside, students moved in steady streams, their voices a low hum of conversations and laughter. Everything felt too clean, too structured, too different from the streets they had known their whole lives. Lily nudged Emma with her elbow. "Still think this is a good idea?" she muttered. Emma swallowed, gripping the straps of the old backpack they had given her, its fabric stiff and unfamiliar. "We made it this far," she murmured back. "Might as well see what's on the other side." The first weeks were hard. They weren't used to sitting in one place for so long, to raising their hands before speaking, to following rules that had never applied to them before. The words on the blackboard sometimes blurred together, and the weight of expectations pressed heavy on their shoulders. But then, slowly, steadily, it started to change. Emma found herself drawn to the books in the school library, each one a doorway into something new. She discovered history beyond the scraps of overheard conversations and faded newspaper clippings. She found stories that stretched far beyond the alleyways she had called home. The same hunger that had once driven her to search through piles of discarded trash now drove her to turn pages, to seek out knowledge the way she once sought survival. Lily struggled more, her frustration simmering beneath the surface, but she refused to give up. "If I can read a book, I can read a paycheck," she grumbled one afternoon, slamming her pencil down after a particularly difficult math problem. Emma smirked. "And if you can read a paycheck, you can read a contract. Maybe even one that says Lily gets paid twice as much as everyone else." Lily snorted. Now you're talking. Their world expanded in ways they never imagined. The librarian, Mr. Thompson as they learned, became their quiet guide. He showed them how to navigate the shelves, how to find the books that mattered. He never treated them like they didn't belong. "You girls remind me of someone," he told them one evening as they lingered after school. "I had nothing growing up, no books, no chances, but someone took a chance on me." He adjusted his glasses, looking at them with something close to pride. "Now it's my turn to pass that on." Meanwhile, their families were changing too. With the museum's help, Emma's father found work at a warehouse, sorting shipments instead of sorting through garbage. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, something he hadn't had in years. Her mother started cleaning houses for families who paid in real money instead of loose change. Lily's parents found their own stability. A small job here, another there, enough to start pulling themselves away from the edge they had lived on for so long. It wasn't perfect. The struggle didn't disappear overnight, but for the first time, they weren't just surviving. They were building something new. The years passed quietly, but time had a way of etching itself into the lives of those who refused to be forgotten. Emma and Lily no longer walked the streets in search of discarded treasures, nor did they spend their nights beneath flickering streetlights, stealing moments with borrowed words. Their journey had led them somewhere new, somewhere they had never dared to imagine. A small bookstore stood on the corner of a quiet street, nestled between a cafe and an old tailor shop. The wooden sign above the door read, "The Open Page," its letters painted in soft, welcoming strokes. Inside, the scent of old paper and fresh ink filled the air, the shelves lined with books. Some new, some donated, some rescued from places where no one had seen their worth. Near the back of the store, beneath a large window that let in the morning light, sat a cozy reading nook. Worn-out armchairs, a patchwork rug, and shelves filled with children's books made the space feel more like a home than a shop. It was a place for those who had nowhere else to go, for the kids who wandered in with uncertain steps, but left with stories tucked under their arms. Emma stood behind the counter, sorting through a new box of donated books. Her fingers brushed over a familiar title, and a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "Can't believe we made it here." Lily's voice came from behind her, low and full of something that wasn't quite disbelief, but still held the weight of everything they had been through. Emma turned, watching as Lily arranged a stack of books on the display table near the entrance. She had grown into herself in ways neither of them had expected, still sharp, still stubborn, but now carrying a confidence that came from knowing she had built something no one could take away. "Believe it," Emma said, tucking the old book onto the shelf. Lily smirked. "Didn't think we'd ever own more books than we could carry." Emma chuckled. "Didn't think we'd own anything at all." A small bell chimed as the front door creaked open. A boy, no older than 10, peeked inside, hesitating in the doorway. His clothes were worn, his hair slightly unkempt. Emma and Lily exchanged a glance. They recognized that kind of hesitation, that kind of uncertainty. Emma stepped forward, her voice gentle. "Come on in." The boy's gaze flickered to the shelves, the reading nook, the warmth of the space. Slowly, he stepped inside. "You can read here as long as you want," Lily added, her tone casual, as if it weren't something extraordinary to offer. The boy's fingers brushed against the spine of a book on the nearest shelf. He didn't take it. Not yet, but he stayed. Emma felt something settle inside her, something quiet and full, something she had once only felt in the pages of books long ago. Their story had begun in the cold, in the forgotten places of the city. It had been shaped by hunger, by uncertainty, by the weight of survival. But it hadn't ended there. They had turned the page, and now they were giving others the chance to do the same. Because books had changed their lives, and maybe, just maybe, they could change someone else's too. A book is just paper and ink until someone opens it. Then it becomes something else entirely. A door, a possibility, a spark waiting to catch fire. Emma and Lily's journey began in the forgotten corners of a city that had no place for them. They were born into a world that valued survival over dreams, where books were seen as luxuries rather than necessities. And yet a single book changed everything. Not because it held riches or secrets, but because it opened their minds to something beyond hunger, beyond the endless search for the next scrap of food or a place to sleep. It showed them that their stories were not set in stone. How many lives are changed by a single moment? A decision to return what wasn't theirs, a risk taken in the face of uncertainty, a shared story under the glow of a street lamp. We often think that only grand actions shape the future, but more often, it is the smallest choices, the unnoticed kindness, the quiet resilience, the unwavering belief that there must be more, that carve new paths in the world. The lesson here is simple, yet powerful. Opportunity is not always given, but it can be created. Emma and Lily had every reason to believe that their future had already been written for them, and yet when they were offered a chance, they took it. They didn't hesitate. They turned the page. And now, so can we. Maybe you've never had to dig through trash for something to sell. Maybe you've never had to wonder where your next meal would come from. But we all know what it's like to feel lost, to long for something more. And just like Emma and Lily, we all have the power to change a story, our own or someone else's. Maybe it starts with a book. Maybe it starts with an act of honesty. Maybe it's a simple moment of kindness that seems too small to matter. But it does. It always does. So as you close this story, ask yourself, who around you is still searching for their next chapter? And how can you help them find it? If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Tell someone about it. Leave a comment, subscribe, and be a part of the journey. Because somewhere out there, someone is waiting for a sign that their life can change. Maybe today, you can be the one to give it to them.